McIntyre observes that this type of patience would be called for if it served some overriding good, some telos which warranted putting other goods in a subordinate place. This is both an important and relevant observation for contemporary leadership, because it points to the need for discernment in respect of the kind and nature of patience required in particular circumstances, its purpose and priority to be given in these circumstances. Another useful insight provided by Grutch is that Aquinas believed the moral virtue of patience protects our good reason from the impulse of the passions, something leaders might wish to consider in negotiations and decision-making, as well as in personal behaviour. In addition, patience also enables a person to bear sorrows and evil without giving way to these or being overwhelmed by them. Patience enables us to endure evil so that it might not be done, and is a virtue which comes from charity, which loves God above all things, and is prepared to do anything to preserve this love. Perseverance, often seen as a synonym for patience, is for Aquinas the virtue which persistently does good over a long period until the good is attained. Like fortitude, it stands firm in the face of difficulty. For the leader working for the common good and persevering despite the effort and hard work this requires, this would require patience in the guise of perseverance, as understood here. On the other hand, Aquinas distinguishes between perseverance and another synonym for patience, namely constancy. The former makes a person persist in doing good where the act of doing so is difficult, while constancy means a person keeps trying despite external obstacles. Both perseverance and constancy might be necessary for leaders, particularly in our business environment, where too many leaders have not persisted in doing good and have done just the opposite. Obstacles and difficulties are inevitable when working for the common good. Persevering despite the obstacles requires patience in the form of constancy. McIntyre reminds us that both integrity and constancy are necessary virtues to counter the moral stress experienced by managers as a result of character fragmentation and the erosion of the true self. This comes about in the contemporary context as a result of managers being required to don different selves and assume varying moral perspectives depending on the stage and audience they are playing to. Moore, basing his argument on McIntyre, puts it as follows. To avoid this potential for what we might call moral stress, the virtues of integrity and constancy are required. Integrity requires us to be the same person in each and every context, while constancy requires us to pursue the same goods through extended periods of time. While McIntyre is helpful in adding to our understanding of patience, it is necessary to note that Aquinas' categorization of the virtues means that, at least in the Catholic tradition, despite being much extolled and admired in the lives of the saints and being seen as a quality to be cultivated, patience is not actually classified as a virtue at all. According to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, patience is not one of either the theological virtues or the cardinal virtues, neither is it one of the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. Rather, it is seen as one of the fruits of the Spirit, of which there are 12. This suggests that patience is something which develops over time, while practicing other virtues such as justice and fortitude, and is part of our becoming truly who we are meant to become. Interestingly, in some other religious traditions, we also find that patience is not always seen as a virtue. Hinduism, Taoism, and Confucianism seem not to view it as a virtue. Islam does, while Theravada Buddhism sees it as one of the 10 perfections, and Mahayana Buddhism gives 6 perfections, of which patience is one. So where does this brief consideration of the anatomy of patience lead us with respect to its relevance and application in ethical, organizational, and business leadership? As Tschula noted, we live in a world where leaders are often morally disappointing, a world which led Solomon to observe that he had become convinced that morally sensitive leaders are essential as a feature of any good organization. It seems to me that patience might be a significant quality or virtue that reflects such moral sensitivity, and perhaps helps to stem the tide of moral disappointment. For, and I quote from Hollander in Tschula, a leader is not a sole voyager, but a key figure whose actions or inactions can determine others' well-being and the broader good. It is not too much to say that communal social health, as well as achieving a desired destination, are largely influenced by a leader's decisions and the information and values upon which they are based. The leadership process is fraught with ethical challenges. If we agree with Northhouse that we could consider respect, service, justice, honesty, and community as the principles of ethical leadership, or if we agree with Larry Spears, who advocates Greenleaf servant leadership, that the 10 characteristics of the servant leader are listening, empathy, healing, awareness, persuasion, conceptualization, foresight, stewardship, commitment to the growth of people, and the building of community, we will immediately understand the relevance of patience in a positive and nuanced sense. Patience is relevant for building relationships and community, both within and outside the organization. It is needed for self-reflection and for discernment in decision-making, and lies at the root of taking a long-term rather than a short-term perspective on building a profitable and sustainable business. Thus, such a leader would be required to exercise patience in the sense of constancy and of perseverance in his or her relationship with others. This means a respect for the dignity of others, taking the time needed for listening empathetically, guiding and facilitating the growth of others, healing wounds where necessary, and persuading to action rather than coercing. To build community requires patience in the sense of perseverance, fortitude, and constancy, and may even require meekness in Aristotle's sense, where anger at injustice may be called for. Business today is called on to contribute to the common good and to be sustainable, and this requires moral discernment and a willingness to venture beyond the confines of short-term profit-making and a merely instrumental approach to social responsibility. But perhaps most of all, leaders need to demonstrate and value patience to counter the prevailing demand for short-term or immediate results, which has so often resulted in unethical behavior. Patience is a much-needed virtue in our current world. Our economic crisis demonstrates no possibility of vanishing in the wake of instant remedies. We have tried these, and they did not work. Now, our leaders need to demonstrate and exemplify the self-control, endurance, and self-mastery advocated by Aristotle, the fortitude, perseverance, and constancy advocated by Aquinas, and MacIntyre, and the discernment required to assess what we are waiting for in the context of the common good. Leaders must therefore ask themselves, what kind of patience is required in our current global context, and discern the purpose and priority of patience in its many guises in terms of this context and the common good of all.